So my name is Philippe Demougin. I'm the Property Innovation Manager at Bromford Flagship. I specialize in innovation, change programs, and the application of new technology and processes in housing. So in this project, I co-led the research with the Disruptive Innovators Network, helping to shape the design, gather evidence, and translate the findings into practical recommendations for the sector. So this research was carried out because while connected homes technology, or IoT, have been around for quite a few years in social housing, most haven't really made it past pilot stage, and we wanted to understand why. So this wasn't about testing a single gadget, it was about looking at the wider ecosystem, the culture, the systems, procurement, relationship with tenants, and the skills that can either enable or block scaling. So our aim was to produce an evidence base for the sector, grounded in reality, to help social landlords move from isolated trials towards embedded resident-centered practices. So we expected there to be some technical challenges, and we also expected some deeper organizational issues to come up. We assumed that things like data integration or tenants trusting or not trusting this technology, as well as the routes for procurement, could come up as potential sticking points. And those assumptions were largely correct. What surprised us, I guess, was just how often the organizational culture or the ownership of these projects were the main barriers rather than the technology itself. We really wanted to get a 360 view on this project, so we aimed to involve landlords, suppliers, infrastructure enablers, as well as residents. And each of those groups brought different types of experiences to the research. The landlords really had a strategic and operational priority, while the suppliers brought the product and integration perspectives. The infrastructure enablers were really helpful to help us understand connectivity and data flow, while residents are obviously the ones living with these technologies day to day and needed to make sure this works for them. So bringing those different perspectives together was essential to get a balanced, joined up picture. So for this research, we deliberately took a multi-method approach. We started off with a literature review to understand what's already known and what gaps are out there. We then conducted a maturity assessment to benchmark the sector readiness for IoT. The bulk of the research was really in the 39 in-depth interviews across landlords, the supply chain, and ecosystem enablers. We then obviously engaged tenants through workshops, webinars, and surveys. And finally, we conducted a market analysis to understand the supply chain and procurement dynamics. And off the back of these, we then tested the roadmap that we developed to see whether the proposed solutions would work in practice. So all these methods enabled us to triangulate evidence from different angles to build a more coherent picture. So in terms of the assumptions we made initially, most of them were broadly met, but I guess they did come through much more strongly than we anticipated. So for example, disconnected data and disconnected data sets, as well as unclear ownership of projects and desired outcomes, were much more common than we anticipated. And in terms of tenant communication, what we found was that most tenants were quite reasonable. Now, some don't necessarily want this technology installed in their homes, so we think there should generally be an opt-in or opt-out process. But most are not opposed to the technology. What they simply want is to understand what's being installed, why it matters, and what's in it for them. How will this improve their life? So when landlords can keep the tenants informed and deliver on the promises they make, then trust can build. When they don't, then confidence slips away. So the recommendations we developed really emerged after mapping the findings from each of our research strands. So the interviews, the maturity assessment, the tenant engagement, the market analysis, and identifying all the various barriers and potential solutions we had identified. So this helped us see where the issues were most consistent and which solutions would have the biggest impact. From there, we developed a roadmap, and we worked with our steering committee as well as other sector experts to test the ideas against real operational realities. So those recommendations weren't just brainstormed. They were rooted in the evidence and shaped by our methods and focused on actions that could dismantle multiple barriers at once, from procurement reforms towards embedding IoT into strategy, towards making residents genuine partner in the design and delivery of these projects. Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway from this research is that it's not really about the technology itself or about the platforms. It's really about the system that sits in it and around it. You can't solve the challenge by simply buying more devices. Without the right strategy, without the right culture, skills, data and data platforms, or relationship with tenants, even the best tech will fail to deliver on its potential. When those elements are aligned, the technology then becomes a powerful tool for prevention, better services, and ultimately healthier homes.